Hey guys, it's Dr. Bala, and this week the biggest thing that I've been hearing from women in my DMs and in my calls is that they are having trouble losing weight no matter what they're doing. They are getting mood swings throughout the day, they're getting crashes of afternoon energy, they're having irregular periods, they're dealing with PCOS, they're getting PMS and irritability before their periods, or they are worried because they have a history of having elevated A1C levels, or they have a family history of diabetes and they're worried that they're going to get it. So if any of this sounds like you, we need to work on your glucose levels and that blood sugar regulation. This is one of the 4 pillars that I work on for hormonal health when I work with any woman, and you will be surprised at how many PMS symptoms, irritability, anger, mood swings all disappear when we work on this one pillar. So let's first start with, how do you know if your blood sugar is a problem aside from having all of those symptoms, right? We have to look at your lab tests. The first one we're going to look at is an elevated A1C, hemoglobin A1C. For me, this is going to be anything above 5.6%. When we get into 5.7, we're in that pre-diabetes territory. And it's still very easy to reverse it at this stage. So I like to start treating the second we get into pre-diabetes territory, which is anything between 5.7 and 6.4. The second thing we're looking at is a high fasting glucose. And on the lab range, it'll say anything less than 100. I like to see less than 90 for fasting glucose. And lastly, we have fasting insulin levels. This is one that a lot of doctors are not checking, but I love checking fasting insulin because your fasting glucose can look fine, your A1C might even look normal, but when we start to see that fasting insulin creeping up, that is how I know, hey, your body is struggling with blood sugar regulation and you've already got some signs of insulin resistance going on here. So if we don't check insulin, then we don't fully know the whole picture. I've seen people where their fasting insulin was above 50, but their A1C was 5.4 and their fasting glucose was 85. So if I only looked at A1C and fasting glucose, I wouldn't think that this person had a blood sugar issue, but they had a raging blood sugar issue because their insulin levels were so high. So make sure that you are getting your insulin levels checked. And for insulin, we want to see levels below 8. The lab ranges typically go all the way up to 30, but I like to see your fasting insulin be below 8. If we start creeping up above that, that is telling me your blood sugar is not staying stable and we're going to start entering insulin resistance territory, or you might already have those symptoms of weight gain and feeling tired and sluggish and not having energy, etc., etc. Okay, so now you know what we need to look at and that your blood sugar needs some work, and we have these objective measures to look at and goals to meet. What are we going to do about it? Where do we start? Let's talk about nutrition first. The first thing I want you to make sure that you are including in every single one of your meals is going to be fiber. I talk about fiber a lot, and it's just very important. Not only is it important for your blood sugar regulation, but it is also important for your gut health. Fiber is the food that feeds the healthy bacteria in our gut. If we're lacking fiber in our diet, we're not even supporting our gut microbiome. So you're not only going to have gut issues, you're also going to have blood sugar issues. So start with fiber in every single one of your meals. I want you to get at least 25 to 30 grams in a day in your total grams of fiber intake. And the reason that fiber is going to be really important for blood sugar regulation is that it helps to slow down that glucose absorption. So make sure you're including it with each of your meals, because as you eat other carbs and sugar, this helps to slow down that absorption. The second thing I want to talk about is protein intake. This is also going to help slow down your glucose absorption, which is why we always eat it with every single meal. And I want you to be aiming for 25 to 30 grams per meal. Did you get that? 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day, but protein is going to be 25 to 30 grams per meal. And you get bonus points if you're starting your meal with your protein. So eat your protein first, then eat your fiber, then end with carbs. You're going to see the best blood sugar regulation when we eat it in that order. Okay, and lastly, let's talk about carb intake. I want you to limit your processed carbs. That means your white rice, your pasta, your breads, your tortillas, etc., those simple carbs, those processed carbs, to about 75 grams in a day. There was a study done in people with diabetes comparing the effects of a low carb versus a Mediterranean diet. The low carb group had limited their carb intake to 20% of their calories or less in a day, and the Mediterranean had a little bit more wiggle room. They had 50 to 60% of their calories coming from carbs. And the result was that in only 4 months, months, in 16 weeks, that's all it took, the low carb group had lowered their A1C by 23% compared to the Mediterranean diet that had lowered their A1C by 13%. And their fasting glucose was lowered by 37% in the low carb group as compared to 21% in the Mediterranean diet group. So this is all to say that even if you're not focusing on limiting carbs and you're eating more fiber and more protein, which is what the Mediterranean diet was focused on, you're still going to see results. And if you want to take it a step further, you can lower the carbs, increase protein, increase fiber, and you'll see even bigger results. All right, now let's move on to movement. I want you to aim for 2,000 to 3,000 more steps in a day than you currently get. So get some kind of tracker that can track how many steps you're getting in a day and average that, track it for like a week and see how much you average. I want you to increase that by 2,000 to 3,000 steps if you're not hitting 10,000, okay? And every month, we're slowly going to increase by 2,000 to 3,000 steps each month until you hit 10,000 steps every single day. And if you really want to prioritize how you're taking those steps, take your steps, go for a walk after you eat your meals. Studies have shown that those who eat a high carb or high sugar meal and go for a walk after still bring their postprandial glucose down to the same level as those who had a high protein, high fiber meal. So a 10-minute walk at about 100 steps per minute, that's the pace that I want you to be walking at after each of your meals, just 10 minutes, is going to help lower your blood sugar levels significantly and help lower that spike that happens after you eat. I do not want you to be afraid of working out. I know the internet is going to scare you about HIIT workouts, especially if you have blood sugar issues or PCOS. Do not listen. Here's how to know if your workouts are too much for you. If you feel completely drained after a workout, like you are just exhausted, tired, can't get off the couch, can't do your daily activities, or the next day you're completely tanked, you're fatigued, you're tired, you can't do your daily activities, that is how you know, okay, that workout was a little bit too much, or I need to prioritize my recovery. I need to increase my protein. I need to add in some electrolytes. Maybe I need to get better sleep, whatever that might be. I don't want you to be afraid of movement. Most people, and especially if you're struggling with blood sugar regulation, do not need to be afraid of working out. So if you're someone who tells people to be afraid of certain workouts, shame on you. I always want to encourage people to move versus not. And that leads me to prioritizing strength training. If you are someone who is just always a cardio girly, or you're just never in the gym, or you're never using weights or doing any kind of resistance training to build muscle, you need to start focusing on that, because that is the biggest thing movement-wise that's going to help us with our blood sugar regulation, because your muscles are acting as a sponge for glucose. The more muscle mass we have, the more we are going to soak up that glucose. Your muscles prefer glucose as their primary source of energy. So the more muscle you have, the more you're just soaking it up. You can get away with a higher carb diet. You can get away with eating more sugar when you have more muscle mass, because you're going to utilize that instead of storing it for later and turning it into fat. And lastly, as far as changes and lifestyle changes go, we need to work on your stress and your sleep. Studies have shown that even one night of poor sleep is going to affect your insulin levels the next day. So imagine chronically poor sleep. I hear this a lot in my postpartum women who are like, I just cannot get those last few pounds off. I stopped breastfeeding, I got my period back. And then I ask them, how are you sleeping? And they say, sleep? What is that? I'm not getting any sleep. That is a huge factor in why you are not able to shed those last few pounds. That is a huge factor in why you are dragging after 2 p.m. That is a huge factor in why you are not able to wake up in the morning and have energy. It's because your sleep is taking a toll on your blood sugar levels. It's why you might notice that my face feels puffier than it usually is, or I just am only gaining weight in my midsection. And a lot of people will say that's cortisol related. And yes, it is cortisol related, because your cortisol is affecting your blood sugar. So if you're chronically getting shitty sleep, you're gonna see a puffy face. You're gonna notice that belly weight gain. You're gonna notice feeling lethargic and tired and dragging yourself all the time and just feeling sleepy. So I want you to start with a consistent bedtime routine. And that is going to start with just a consistent bedtime, okay? I want you to have a consistent bedtime and a consistent wake time, because that is going to set your circadian rhythm. If you are struggling to fall asleep at the same time every day, if you are struggling to wake up at the same time every day, or if you're like, oh, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are my early meeting days, but then on the other days you're sleeping in, your body has no idea when to secrete that cortisol in the morning to help you feel awake, to help you get out of bed, to help you have energy. So I want you to be consistent with your wake time. Even if you're not consistent with your bedtime, I want you to be consistent with your wake time, because that is going to help that cortisol awakening response. You're going to feel more energetic in the morning. You're going to have more energy throughout the day. You're going to sleep better at night when you wake up at the same time every single day. So if you wake up at 6 o'clock for those early meetings, mornings, you better be waking up at 6 o'clock every single day. I know you're gonna hate me for saying that, but I promise you, within just 2 to 3 weeks, you're gonna have more energy. You're gonna be sleeping better. You're gonna feel better. You're gonna wake up less puffy because your circadian rhythm knows what to do and when to secrete that cortisol. Okay, now that we have all of the pieces on what to do, how to eat, what changes you need to make, you're probably like, okay, well, how am I gonna know if this is working until I go and get my labs done again? There are other ways that we can actually monitor your glucose without having to go in for blood work. There are at-home monitors where you can prick your finger and just take your glucose that way. That is a little bit more invasive. My favorite way of tracking is the continuous glucose monitor. So this is something that you might see people maybe at the gym or just out and about wearing that little circle on their arm. And what that does is it sits in your arm. The sensors last for about 2 weeks or so. And they sit in your arm and they're constantly monitoring your glucose. So you download an app and you can tap it. You kind of turn into a little robot when you wear these, but you can tap it on your arm and it'll tell you in real time what your glucose is doing. And here's why I like using this. It's because you'll know quicker what works for your body and what doesn't. When I have patients wear this, I've seen people who are like, oh my God, I didn't realize that for my body, it's legumes, it's beans that are spiking my glucose. I had someone who had a Chipotle bowl and they forgot beans one time and they were like, okay, my glucose looks good on the continuous glucose monitor. They tracked their glucose after they ate that bowl. It was rice and chicken and, some other stuff in there, but they didn't add beans this time, which usually they do. Looked at the blood sugar, totally fine. Then the next time they did it, again, they were tracking their blood sugar. They added the beans and their blood sugar had such a huge spike that had trouble coming back down. And I know we talked about fiber being a really important part of your meal, but for this person, beans were just creating a lot more issues in their gut. And they also were struggling with dysbiosis, but they found very quickly that, hey, when I eat beans, my blood sugar is not happy. But they also found that they could eat 6 cookies and their blood sugar was fine. So it was the carbs that was messing them up, not the sugar. I'm not saying, do this so that you can go eat 6 cookies, but it's just nice to know what works for your body and what doesn't. Another patient that I was working with found with her glucose monitor that she was like, when I work out in the morning versus at night, my blood sugar is much more stable. Those spikes come down quicker after I eat if I have that workout in the morning. And it doesn't even have to be a big workout. She'll just do a 20-minute walk on the treadmill in the morning. And that, even if she does no other workout the rest of the day, still helped her blood sugar stay stable throughout the day, more so than doing like a 60-minute workout later in the evening. So finding out how your body responds to things and what's going to be the most high yield for you is really helpful when we have that glucose monitor. It's not necessary, but it's just nice to see how your body reacts and responds. You are still going to see the benefit of working out in the evening. Even if you didn't have that glucose monitor to tell you that, hey, the workout in the morning was better, after 3 to 4 months of doing a consistent workout every evening, you're still going to see improvement in your insulin and your blood sugar levels. So do not discount that you need to have something to track your glucose levels on a daily basis. You are still going to see improvements, even if you're sticking to the things that we're talking about. All right. And lastly, let's talk about supplements. I know you're waiting for this one. I know you're like, okay, well, what supplements can I take to help with my glucose? We're going to talk about 3 in particular that have the most research for blood sugar regulation. The first one is berberine. I'm sure you've heard of this. It's all over TikTok as nature's Ozempic. So berberine has been studied and found to be as effective as metformin in lowering your glucose levels. And some people do have trouble with the GI side effects that can come with berberine, similar to metformin. You might notice stomach aches or nausea or loose stools. All of that can happen when we're altering glucose levels. But this is an option to consider that is natural and has been shown to be as effective as metformin in lowering glucose. And the research dosing is anywhere from 900 to 2,000 milligrams a day in 3 divided doses. The second one is myo-inositol. You might have heard of this one too. This is a really popular one in women who have PCOS. It's also used in gestational diabetes to help lower insulin levels. And it has been found to help significantly lower glucose levels and insulin levels, and as compared to metformin as well. So I love using myo-inositol for women with PCOS, and I find that it's a lot easier on your stomach than berberine is. And I also find that it's really helpful for things like anxiety and mood disorders as well. So it's kind of hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. And we also see research to show that myo-inositol can help lower thyroid antibodies. So if you struggle with thyroid issues and PCOS and blood sugar issues, this is going to be the one for you. And lastly, we have magnesium. Studies have found that magnesium supplementation has reduced fasting glucose and insulin levels and A1C in those with type 2 diabetes. And the doses are ranging anywhere from 400 to 1,000 milligrams a day. They also see that doses at 400 to 700 milligrams a day are helpful in lowering cholesterol levels as well. But if it's lower than 400, they found no improvement at all. So it has to be a minimum of 400. So So I just want you to know that managing your blood sugar is possible with small daily changes. It's not the big things that we do. It's not the new workout and the personal trainer that you added on. It's the small daily habits. It's increasing how many steps you're getting. It's adding in protein and fiber with your meals. It's getting in a walk after you eat. It's getting a consistent morning wake time, right? It's these little things that we do that are adding up over time to help improve our insulin sensitivity, our blood sugar regulation, and then lowering A1C and all of those other symptoms that you were having before, right? Helps with the weight gain. It helps with the irritability. It helps your PMS symptoms. It helps you have a more regular cycle, ovulating more regularly, getting pregnant, etc., etc. So if you're struggling with where to start and having more energy or seeing better periods or having better moods or being able to lose that last few pounds, go schedule a visit so we could talk about what is going on in your body and how we can help regulate your blood sugar a little bit better. If you liked this, please subscribe. We have more period content coming for you.